Ever wondered how children really learn in their early years? What sparks their curiosity and what engages them? Foundational years are not just about learning letters and numbers. They are the building blocks for all future learning. For over a decade, Language and Learning Foundation has worked to strengthen foundational learning through effective classroom practices and system strengthening initiatives. Drawing on this experience, we bring to you LLF Speaks Season 2, a 10-episode podcast series where we engage with global and national voices to explore crucial subjects, contributing to improving FLN outcomes. Stay tuned to deep dive on how to do FLN, conversations on building foundational learning at scale.
Hello everyone, I'm Shveta Lall, Associate Director at Language and Learning Foundation. Welcome to another episode of LLF Speaks. This season, we are exploring the central question on how we ensure that foundational literacy and numeracy effort translate into real learning gains for students at scale in India. We have spent a lot of time talking about what a good classroom should look like, what should happen inside a good classroom, like good pedagogy, strong teachers, and the right learning materials. But then there is a layer in between the classroom and the policy, the layer that is responsible to actually help translate whatever is planned to reach to the children at scale. Across India, district and block education officers play a critical role in supporting schools, guiding teachers, as well as ensuring that the reforms are implemented effectively. They are the bridge between the system as well as the classroom practices. But what does it take for this middle tier to function as strong academic leaders rather than just administrative functionaries? And what are the system conditions that allow them to happen? To explore this, I'm joined today by Anustup Nayak. Anustup is the project director at Central Square Foundation and leads the early childhood education and instructional design and innovation team. He works closely with multiple state government agencies and technical partner organizations to support the implementation of structured pedagogy curriculum and teacher professional development programs. Before CSF, Anustup helped scale up an entrepreneurial venture named Exceed Education. Anustup holds a master's degree in education from Harvard Graduate School of Education and Public Policy at Georgia Tech, bringing over 2 decades of experience in designing and delivering education intervention at scale. Welcome, Anustup, to this podcast.
Thank you, Shveta, for having me on this podcast, and I'm really excited to have this conversation.
So let's start from the very beginning. I know for most of our audience, I think this term, the middle tier, might be not something that they are known to. So let's start with what exactly is this middle tier in the education system?
The way I think about the education system is like a human body. So think of the head, hands, the fingers. The head is really the national bodies which are creating education policy. And the hand is the state level bodies which are actually operationalizing these policies. But finally, it is the teachers who are taking these programs into the classroom so that children can learn well, and say they are really like the fingers. But you can't pick up something with your own hand unless you have this connective tissue that keeps the fingers and the hand together. So, like you said, the middle tier is the connecting tissue between policy and practice. And that's why the middle tier is such an important element of the education system. It's almost like this invisible layer which keeps everything together. And one of the things I want to discuss here is to give our audience a real flavor for what this middle tier looks like. So I want you to imagine we are going into a small town, and let's say in Uttar Pradesh, which both of us are familiar with. And imagine we walk into the office of the Block Siksha Adhikari, the BSA, right? It's a small office, but it's so much abuzz with activity. You'll have the Block Siksha Adhikari, then you'll have the BEOs, then you also have the ARPs who are looking at direct mentoring of the schools. We also have SRGs. So it's an entire team of people working together. Not to forget other officers in the office, such as people who are looking at MIS, people who are looking at training. So this entire team is actually working on the district. Sometimes I also forget just the sheer scale of what they do and how hard their job is. The average district in India, has between 1,000 to 2,000 schools. And just compare that to any school system. I was doing some research today. There are about 1,200 Kendriya Vidyalayas, there are about 1,000 DAV schools and about 200 DPSs. So the average BSA or the district administrator is handling a system so big and so complex. So their job is really very complex. And that job really breaks down into two big areas. One is the administrative piece. And that is not to be scoffed at, because when you want to run 2,000 schools, it's incredibly complex. But the more important part is the academic part. So what do the middle tier officials do? They're supporting the schools with training, they're supporting the schools with supervision, they're supporting the schools with providing teaching learning materials, assessments, so on and so forth. And we work across several states like you all, and we see that the average span of the frontline officials who are providing academic mentorship is also wide. And this complexity of their work, the size, the scale, makes this an incredibly difficult job. And but this job is really important. Without it, we will actually never be able to move foundational learning outcomes. So therefore, I'm very happy that we are talking about the middle layer today.
Yeah, thanks, Anustup. Yeah, so this middle tier, in a way, in short, if we can say, is the layer between the state and the classroom. And it's, as we can say, the district education officers, the block education officers, and the academic staff who actually go into the classroom on a day-to-day basis, providing feedback to the teachers. Okay, that makes it clear. Like, we know this layer now, but coming to what has it become so important, why there's so much of attention today for this layer, and what is the evidence for that?
Well, this is a great question. And if you look at the global discourse for the last 2 to 3 years, you've been hearing this word middle tier or middle management or academic support a lot. And if you dig deeper, why has it become such an important question? As foundational learning programs are rolling out across the world, and certainly in our country because of the Nipun Bharat mission, we are finding out that having good inputs, whether it is textbooks and teaching learning materials or structured pedagogy or teaching at the right level, those kinds of inputs have been proven that they work. But just having these inputs doesn't mean they'll be implemented well in the classroom. So there was a very interesting study done by Noah Mangrist of the What Works Hub for Global Education, which compared lots of programs of structured pedagogy and TAL programs across the world and looked at the effect sizes of these programs. What they found out was something very interesting. They found out that between programs that showed poor effect sizes and between the programs that showed very high effect sizes, there was almost a 10x gap. So the programs which showed poor effect sizes, let's say they were around 0.07 and the ones that were very high effect sizes were, let's say, around 0.7, 0.8. So what was the difference? The difference was in implementation. Very simply put, which means the teachers adopted these programs, but they also implemented it with better fidelity. And the secret sauce of implementation is whether those teachers actually felt supported in their jobs in the classroom. And that is where the middle management comes in. But what gives me a lot of confidence is the work that we have done together. Over the last 3 years, CSF, Language Learning Foundation, and Room to Read have partnered together in a set of programs which we have implemented in districts in UP and in MP. And educational initiatives has just evaluated these programs, and the results are out. I'm happy to share that the results are staggering. You can see that there are zero point 0.4 to zero point 0.7 standard deviations impact on student learning, and especially encouraging because both the treatment group and the control group got the materials and the structured pedagogy program rolled out by the state. But why did the treatment group perform so much better? Again, the secret sauce there is the middle management, that the academic mentors prioritized academic support to the schools. They were supported effectively at the district level and the block level by the BEOs and the DEOs, and the teachers received very, very high quality feedback and inputs that use data on student learning and classroom observation. And this kind of data is very important because very often we want to get better results out of all of these investments we are making in foundational learning programs. But how can we make those investments work better? And the key is to support the middle management.
So true, Anustup. Even the new education policy and the Nipun Bharat Mission guidelines have also emphasized, I think for the first time, the role has got a little clarity that they are not just there to manage schools, but actually ensure that the learning outcomes are achieved. So you're right. Going ahead, I think we now know this layer. We also know that layer is very, very important. My next question to you is, what have you seen on the ground, like in India and globally? How is this layer functioning? Also, what is making a real difference and where are the gaps? So I would like to hear that from you.
That's a great question, and I'll give you the honest answer, which you probably already know, that the glass is always half full or half empty. When we work across states and across districts, we find a wide variance in the effectiveness of middle management. On one hand, there are places where we find that the middle management is not very effective, not because they don't want to, but because of many systemic constraints, they're not able to do their job well. But in many cases, I feel more optimistic when I see these results that they're actually adding a lot of value. And what have we learned about when does the middle tier add a lot of value? I think 3 or 4 things have stood out. One is when the senior leaders of the district actually prioritize learning and teaching among many other responsibilities that they have in the district, because the district has many responsibilities within education itself. The second is they prioritize amongst all of these different tasks that they have to do, the task of supporting schools through academic mentoring and supervision. And the third is these districts are also getting all of their staff to look at data, review it well, and take some actions based on that data. So these 3 or 4 things stand out when we look at districts which are implementing programs better, not just in foundational learning, but also in other aspects of education. But like I said, the glass is half empty and half full. So the part which is half empty, I think, needs a lot of consideration. And the way I'd like you to think about it is, depending on whether you're non-vegetarian or vegetarian, I'll call it the burger problem or the vada pav problem. So you can think of this little patty which is squished between 2 bread pieces. And what is the patty? The patty is really the middle management. And what it is squished by is from 2 sides. From the top, the middle management receives lots of pressure and instructions from people above them, whether it is at the district level or the state level. There's lots of directives, there's lots of areas in which they need to work on, and they have to deliver those outcomes. There's lots of problems teachers face, and unfortunately or fortunately, they do not have any kind of redressal mechanism other than the academic mentor coming to visit them. But the academic mentor hears those things but is unable to solve many of these problems. So this kind of pressure puts a lot of stress on the middle management problem. There's lots of studies done on that, some of which I'm sure LLF has done, which I'd love to hear from you. There's a very interesting study that Yamini Iyer had done, and she calls it the post office paradox, that very often this middle management layer acts like a post office. They're passing things from the top, information, down to the bottom, and collecting data from the bottom and passing it to the top, but not able to make more value out of it. And that is where the challenge of the middle management is. But I'd love to hear from you, what are your takes on where the middle management is also struggling and also adding value?
So, Anustup, you're right. Like LLF also has been working in multiple states with this middle tier, and our experience is also like there is a mixed picture. There are pockets where the middle tier is really doing a fantastic job. The academic staff, the academic mentors regularly visiting the classrooms, providing effective feedback to the teachers. The district and the block education officers actually using the data to guide classrooms and teachers. The review meetings actually focusing on teaching and learning. And there you see actually how the teachers are reforming their classrooms, and there you see a shift also. But this is again in some pockets. The reality in most of the situation is that this middle tier is stretched in administrative duties. There's a lot of compliance work. There is a lot of reporting work that they have to handle. And that's why the supportive supervision part, where they actually have to support the teachers, do not happen on the ground.
No, I completely resonate with you, and we are working together in many of the states and districts together. What we are seeing is exactly what you said, that when they actually are able to perform the academic duties, the effect on that is very pronounced. And I'll give you a quick couple of examples and data points. In one of the districts where we helped the academic mentors with joint visits, helping them do better support to the teachers, in just 4 visits, their adherence to their protocol, the quality of that visit went up by 30%. When specific feedback was given to teachers, something as specific as, to use the Akshara grade or to use a specific TLM, to use a specific part of the TG, we actually did a quiz on teachers, and we saw that from 46% to 83%, we saw a jump in the teacher's pedagogical content knowledge. So that gives me a lot of confidence that even if we can squeeze out a little bit of additional quality inputs from our mentors, the effect can be very high. So Shveta, one of the things that I'm being curious about is LLF has been working for such a long time across many states. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to drill down specifically into the experience of academic mentorship, that what kind of inputs are actually working at that interface between the coach and the teacher, and what kind of support mechanisms that are being provided to the academic mentors which enables them.
We have been working with this academic mentors now for almost a decade. And what we have seen, a shift from what was seen as inspection to what is now seen as a supportive supervision. When I say supportive supervision, it's like a mentor sitting into a classroom, observing what the children are doing, then having a very meaningful conversation with the teachers to see what's working, what is not working, and how it can be improved. That is something that I think we had been working for a very long time. I remember one of the classroom visits where there was a reading classroom going on, and there were just 3 children engaged, and the rest of the children were just sitting behind. And this teacher mentor, after the classroom observation, went to the teacher and not just said that the children were not engaged. He just asked, why do you think only 3 children were engaged? What can be done actually to engage other children? And then actually he demonstrated a strategy to engage all of the children. Now that is what I feel is actual supportive supervision. Again, a big example is how the system should be taking it into account. For example, in states like Uttar Pradesh and Haryana, where we are working, we have seen when you actually make this arrangement for the teachers, like for the teacher mentors or the academic mentors, you have a standardized observation tool, you have a standardized protocol, then it becomes easier for them also to prioritize those things. For example, the standardized protocol makes you structure your school visits. Like in UP, you have 40 minutes where you actually go into the classroom. The first 40 minutes you spend into the classroom for observation. The next 20 minutes you actually assess the children. Then the 40 minutes where you have a feedback and demonstration with the teachers. And the last 20 minutes where you actually interact with the HM, the headmasters and the other staff. So that helps in structuring the entire school visit for them. again, the standardized observation tool. Initially, the observation tool was heavily, I think, loaded with just infrastructural information. But after we transformed that observation tool to actually what they need to observe in the classroom, the indicators were very academic in nature. We definitely saw a shift the way the classrooms are being observed. So what I feel is these academic mentors need very specifically what should they do in the classroom and how should they do. And I think one of the gap over the years had been that these mentors have never been trained like mentors. They have been trained like teachers. Whereas we all know that mentoring requires a completely different skill set. They need to understand, observe the classroom, how they should be providing the feedback. Many a times they have to facilitate the workshop, the cluster meetings, how that facilitation skill needs to be taken into account. Then the communication, they need to have that kind of confidence in the teacher that they can rely on them. So that rapport building again is something that they need to learn. Then they collect so much of data on an everyday basis, but many of them, they do not know how to utilize that data effectively, present it on the top level. I think that is another gap. In a diagnostic study that we did, Anustup, like last 2 years back, with this ARPs in Uttar Pradesh, the academic resource people, we definitely find out that there were so many gaps, I think challenges that they were facing. One is the role is not clear to many of them. The second is the administrative overload that we all know, like many times there's some messages coming from the top and they have to just leave everything and do it. Then the support that is provided by their supervisors, how effective is that support? Are they actually being guided properly on that? And there is no continuous professional development for them. If you see, as I already mentioned, that most of the time what they input they get is mostly what the teachers are getting. And lastly, I think the motivation and the confidence. There's very less motivation because there are no career pathways for these academic mentors as to any kind of promotion. So I think these are some of the areas which the government should look into.
When we nudge the mentors to make it more specifics, for example, when children are struggling with decoding, to use the Akshara grade or some TLM in numeracy or refer to a specific part of the teacher guide, we have seen that the teacher pedagogical content knowledge, which we measured through a pre-post quiz, actually showed a remarkable increase from about 46 to 83%. That's the power of very high quality feedback. The second thing you mentioned was supporting the mentors with mentor professional development. And just with 4 joint visits conducted by our program managers, going with the mentors, talking to them, providing them with the support, that 40-20 protocol that you talked about, the adoption of that protocol went up by 30%. And that just shows exactly what you're saying, that if we could set aside some bandwidth for academic work, the mentors can actually do a really, really good job.
Yeah, very true. I think we definitely know that the academic staff most of the time are not operating in isolation. They prioritize things that are again the priority of the district and the block officers. So I would also like to ask you here, like there is a growing expectation from this administrative layer also that they become instructional leaders. And why do you think that they will take up this role, and how do you think that they will be able to help in improving the learning outcomes? Like any thoughts around that, how we can actually strengthen this administrative layer so that they are also able to support the FLN mission in a much better and effective manner?
It's a great question to think about. If you look at it, the administrative layer is extremely important. While we all want to emphasize instructional leadership, we should realize that it is a journey. Overnight, we will not be able to transform this entire cadre of thousands and thousands of officers from being more sort of compliance and implementation focus. And when I'm saying implementation, more around the implementation of administrative duties, to actually focusing on academics. But I'll give you a couple of examples which would illustrate this point. A few stories from the ground like you shared. The story that comes to my mind is a district not very far from here, Ghaziabad, where we work. and Shri Abhinav Gopal ji, who is the IAS officer and the Chief Development Officer, really leading all of the development initiatives of the state. He has taken up foundational literacy and numeracy on a really, for lack of a better word, mission mode. It's made it very, very important for everyone in the district. And what has he done? He has done many good things, but at least in my experience, three things stand out. The first is he sort of created this campaign called Har Bacha Nipun, which means every child will become Nipun. And through that, sort of evangelized, energized the entire cadre to get excited about the fact that teaching and learning is very, very important. And through that, he got us and his academic team to create a very simple one-pager, which got the teachers to understand what are those learning outcomes that they should target every quarter for the child, which are those prioritized academic practices in the teacher guide they should implement in the classroom. And here is the senior most bureaucrat in the district talking about specific learning outcomes, specific teaching and learning practices. That created so much energy. The second thing he did was to do what you were just talking about, is to create review and data-driven review mechanisms, really finding out what are some of the gaps and what are some of the opportunities by looking at the data. So for example, one of the things that in one of the review meetings, it came up that while there were a lot of visits to schools, some schools were getting more visits than others and some schools were getting less. So how do we fix something like that? But the third and most important thing he did was to create an atmosphere in the entire team in the district which had the right balance of accountability and support. One of the statements he made, which stands out, is he was addressing all the BEOs and ARPs, and he said, "You are the people making Viksit Bharat, and not just us." So, empowering, making this cadre feel really important. But the point I'm making is that when the administrative leadership does few simple things, first, they prioritize learning. Second, they are able to somehow rationalize the administrative tasks, because you cannot get rid of the administrative tasks, they're important, and make space for academics. And the third is to create that atmosphere of trust, openness, of course, with accountability, with responsibility. I think that's when the administrative layer actually starts acting as a true enabler for academics. So one of the things I've been reading about, and I keep reading many research studies, and one thing that came to my notice a few months ago was this wonderful study that LLF has done on the BEOs. And it's interestingly entitled 13-Headed Wrench. Very interesting title. So tell me more what you found in that.
So there's an interesting, why we kept the title is also quite interesting. So we were just interviewing many of the BOs, and one of the BOs just said about his role. And that was not in any kind of, it was more like we all are like 13-headed wrench, fit us anywhere, anytime, and we are there to work. And that shows from the what we actually, I think the study also talks about the kind of multiple hats they have to wear. They are they have to manage not just not just the classrooms, but also the textbooks that are coming in, the schemes, that there are multiple schemes, I think the midday meal scheme, then also the widow insurance, and there are so many things that they have to do. And I think that's where we knew that they have multiple roles. Again, another thing that came out of that study, where we came to know this layer more deeply, was if you look at their JDs and the KPIs, there's nothing that is around academics. Everything is around administrative. An interesting thing that they have to observe 40 schools in a month's time. And if you look at the observation tool that they are using, most of the indicators, there are 50 indicators, all of them, just leaving one, are around the classroom and the infrastructure. That's it. But there's just one indicator which is around academics. So that brings us to the question, if I am not expecting from this administrative layer, that they should be in the system. Like, if there is no expectation of any academic responsibility or instructional leadership, how can I expect that to happen on its own? We also found certain block education officers, district education officers who are going beyond individually. So I think somewhere, as you rightly said, that in individual capacity, there are many people who are doing really fantastic job as administrator, asking the right question, actually sending the right messages on the ground. But the thing is, then when it is just then individuals, it is not the system that is promoting them. And what I and as organization LLF is feeling is that how we can sensitize the system now to actually strengthen their roles much better. So there are few things that I think what we have been trying to do. There's an implementation research that we are doing again with Brink Foundation, What Works Hub, and Gates Foundation, and where we are actually trying to see, if we do not actually change their role, as you rightly said, we cannot take away their administrative role. But how we can, within that design, implement certain few things by which they can actually make their administrative roles and the academic role a balance between these two, is something that we are trying to do. The other thing is how what we feel is that they should be given the right tools, something like practical things that they can use to orient their attention towards teaching and learning. The second is investing time on their capacity building, not just one-off training which they attend and forget, but a continuous professional development on instructional leadership. Many a times, many of these BOs join just like that with no induction program at all, and they are just learning on the job. So this is, and you are expecting so much from this layer. And the third, I think, which is the most important, is how we can actually refine the policies. Their JDs, their KPIs should now also have some academic as well as instructional leadership expectation from them.
Shweta, I think that was very instructive, that what you were saying was this transition from administrative to instructional leadership is not really an either or. Both are there, but how do we make the instructional part more useful? And the second thing is the professional development piece that you mentioned. And I think that's where everybody needs to play a role: government, and of course civil society organizations, and also some of the bodies like diets and other institutions could be providing a lot more support. And I think it is very important that we start treating this cadre with the respect that they deserve.
Let me ask you to paint a picture of what actually good actually looks like. If we talk about this middle tier is functioning well, what is visibly different? What does a teacher experience? What does a classroom look like? And for everything you have seen, what makes you believe we can get that at scale?
Well, that's a good question and a hard one, but I'll still try to attempt it. And I think if I were to look at the teacher's experience, and imagine I'm a teacher in the classroom right now, I'm experiencing a person who is coming into my classroom who is like that 13-headed wrench, who has many jobs to do. The person is mostly coming to inspect me, hold me accountable, find out what I'm doing. And in some sense, like we discussed, is acting like a post office messenger between me and the higher officials. But instead of that, how do I want to experience my coach or my mentor? I want to experience my mentor as a specialist doctor and not that 13-headed wrench, right? Somebody who themselves have been hired, trained, and equipped with the right tools and techniques. So just like there is structured pedagogy tools for teachers, or curriculum materials or assessment tools for teachers, we need some kind of tools to aid the mentor themselves. And that is where technology has helped a little bit, but we need to do further. The second transition we really want to make is the transition from being an inspector, which of course some parts needs to be inspected. We don't say it should go away, but can that mentor start playing an instructional coach? Can that person start demonstrating high impact teaching practices? So if I am unable to conduct the oral language development section in my teacher guide, or I'm unable to do the concrete pictorial abstract transition in math, can that person actually provide me that instructional support through demonstrations, gives me feedback, gives me opportunities to excel in my classroom, and stays with me through my journey as a coach? And the third transition is from just passing on messages to actually working like an air traffic controller. So imagine like an air traffic controller has lots of things, lots of planes landing, but they have incredible amount of data. So for example, can my coach starts looking at my student learning data and tell me which are those learning gaps, which are those hard spots all my students are failing? Can my instructional coach look at the entire portfolio of schools that they have and find out, are there schools that need specific support so that they can be called in for better training? So this kind of transition from being this 13-headed wrench or an inspector or a messenger to being a specialist physician, to being an instructional coach, to being an air traffic controller is the transition I'd love to see. But this is not going to happen just because we will dream about it. It will happen through a set of very, very specific and deliberate steps that both the states and also support organizations like us have to take. If I were to look at a couple of things that the state needs to do, and they're already beginning to do some of it, is first to really look at this entire cadre of people as the fulcrum around which the entire implementation of the program is based, which means starting from recruiting the right people with the right competencies, providing professional development, both in terms of induction, but more hand-holding on the job. The coaches also need coaching. The second is, like we've mentioned throughout this conversation, to take a really hard look at the administrative responsibilities. Find ways to rationalize them, find ways to use technology, find ways to eliminate some of those things which are standing in the way. And the third is to really create a culture in which this layer also feels that they're valued, they're supported, their concerns are being heard. Because if they are valued, they are supported, and they feel that they are being heard, they will create the similar conditions for teachers. And when it comes to support, organizations like us continuously focusing on both the tools and the training are important. We need to develop a set of tools which actually support coaches, and we need to continuously support those coaches with joint visits, with a more continuous professional development, not just one-off. And hopefully, once we put and invest in these over a long term, we see major improvement. And in some of the states where we have seen learning gains, let's say in UP, in Haryana, and in other states that we are seeing, it's happening because those states are putting in these measures. And I am really hoping that in the next 4 or 5 years, we will see a cadre of real instructional leaders.
Yeah, that's a powerful note to end this conversation, Anustup. And as you rightly said, collaboration between organizations like us, how we work on the continuous professional development of these cadre, actually refining the policies that makes their role again clearer for them, and the way they support, the tools, the right tools that we can provide, all this will make a difference. And in the coming few years, as you rightly said, many of the states are working on it. They are designing ways where not just the teachers are supported with clarity, confidence and continuity, but the layer that sits in between that actually translate the policy into classroom practices is also supported well, strengthened well, is something that we are looking forward to. So thank you so much, Anustup, for joining us for this conversation. For the listeners now, whether you are a PMU at a state education department, an NGO, or someone who just cares what happens into the classrooms, I hope today's episode has helped you see this layer a little differently, not as a bureaucrat structure, but as a set of people who, with the right condition, can be the most powerful lever of learning that we have. Stay tuned for the next episode. Strong foundation, stronger future.